My name is Richard Casper. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, and I teach the course here at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. This program started basically because after my injuries in war, I didn't know how to deal with myself. I came back, had a brain injury, my best friend was shot and killed. I didn't know myself at that point. Art has helped me by giving me a chance to have a voice again. I used to not be able to leave my house. I couldn't go talk to people. I would physically throw up and get sick. If you could be 0%, that's committing suicide, 100% being the best you can be. After the Marine Corps, after being injured, I was at probably like a 9 or a 10. And after this school, I was back to like 85% me. For people who may struggle like I did and didn't want to break out of the house and be like, I'm not sure if this is going to work, I just want them to know my story and be able to come out here and learn with other combat vets how to do art. And if they're looking for one more way, if they just come out here and give me a chance, it's going to be worth it.
What we were aiming for is to express what we were dealing with, when we were deployed and during our military career, where we literally get out of our element, go on this kind of like alternate reality to go back in time, think about what we went through, and express it to other people.
Just being exposed to different concepts of art, like at the museum and some of the contemporary art we saw, that's what influenced me to try doing a performance piece for my last project.
The opportunity to be at the school was just phenomenal. It was amazing. At lunch, we could go and wander the halls of the museums, and that was pretty awesome.
I think the hardest part was actually talking about what I've been through. It was easy talking to Richard because he is a combat veteran and he has been through stuff I've been through. And
my job was to, go find IEDs or find landmines or anti-personnel landmines and take them apart. And little did I know, I was putting that stuff inside me.
At first, it's a little hard to let yourself become vulnerable. You won't really know what to do right away. It takes a couple days. I know for me, it took a week.
Being surrounded by a bunch of veterans that know what combat feels like, knows the after effects of combat, knows how it feels to come home. It was really comfortable being here.
They're going to come to class like normal college students, treated like normal people that know how to be like, I can be in college, I am a normal person, and I could live like everybody else lives. If even one of them chose to go to college and study art and has that artist brain to where it saved them, it's totally worth it.
Hi everybody, happy Tuesday. My name is Emily. I am back here in my apartment studio and I'm going to show you some more stuff on the wheel. So I got a little bit of a late start, so I am just measuring out some clay for what we're going to do today. I'm going to be showing you all how to make closed forms on the wheel. What I mean when I say that is normally when you're making something on the wheel like a cup or bowl, it has kind of an open top. And I'm going to show you actually how to close that off so that it's like a solid form, but that's completely hollow. So a little bit more of like a intermediate advanced technique. So yeah, let's get some clay measured up. So I've been working a lot on with these closed forms, doing a lot of just kind of like trying to design new stuff, come up with new ideas, some prototyping. And one of the things that I've been working on are these vases, which I will show you all how I make today. It's got a little separate piece that comes off that's sort of like a flower frog, so you can put the stems of your flowers through those holes and it kind of separates everything out. So yeah, that's one example of how you can do that, and we'll be making, I think, a couple of those today. And then I'm also going to try and make some little salt and pepper shakers today as well. This was the first time that I had made these designs, were these pieces, and I ended up actually making the holes a little bit too big. The salt and pepper just like fell out of it. So I'm going to try remaking these today as well. One thing that I like to do when I am sort of working through a design for the first couple of times is play with the amount of clay that I use. So for example, I believe this was 2 pounds of clay, and then I made a couple others that were with 3 pounds. So kind of a subtle difference, but it's a lot, actually it's not super subtle, it's a lot whiter. So today I'm going to be making a couple more at the 2 pounds. I kind of like that for a small size. And then I think I'm going to be making a larger one at about 4 pounds. There's a little bit that I want to change with the shapes as well. So I got my 4 pounds of clay already measured out. I just use a little kitchen scale. It's nice because you can measure the pounds and ounces. We'll get that zeroed out. Got a little bit of a precarious setup today. That's all right. Got my 4 pounds measured out. I'll measure out my 2. Sometimes I'm really good at just like cutting off a chunk and it being very close. Sometimes I'm not. So we'll see how it goes this morning. Thanks for tuning in on this Tuesday morning. If you are there, feel free to give me a shout, either your name, where you're tuning in from. Love to hear from you. Definitely feel free to ask any questions as I'm working too. All right, we are close. I went over. So one thing that I'll do, you'll see that it's kind of a lot of just like little pieces of clay. Before I get started, I'm gonna do a technique called wedging to just kind of get everything back together. And as I'm kind of mushing all of these chunks into one, they're kind of trapping air in between them, which isn't ideal. So I'm gonna go back and wedge all of that kind of air out. So you get to see me do that today. So we'll go for another 2 pounds. Right on the money. So I think I'm just going to start by measuring out my clay for the vases, and then once I get to the salt and pepper shakers, I'll measure it out then, just so that we aren't all watching me put clay on a scale. The clay that I'm using today is from Standard Ceramic Supply. It's a brick clay. Actually, let me grab a piece real quick to show you what it'll look like finished. I forget what number it is, but like I said, it's a brick clay, a mid-fire brick clay for anyone who's interested in the temperature. It's about 2200 degrees. You can see it's just got a lot of texture. So my price tag's on the bottom. Got a lot of texture. It's a nice kind of warm red color, like red-orange. So that's the clay that I'm working with today. All right. I'm going to do a little moving around just so I can get my wedging slab set up on the wheel so you can see this. So we'll do a little bit of dancing here. Wedging is similar to kneading, like if you work with doughs at all. But like I said, it just helps kind of get all of the air.
Your IT guy coming in. Hold on 1 second. You're not live on Mixer. I'm just going to fix it right now.
All right. Thanks, Garrett. Garrett, the IT
Hello.
Get the Mixer people up.
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
That should do it.
All right. Coming in.
All those people on Facebook watching.
Hello, everyone.
Like
Facebook.
5,000 people on Facebook.
All right.
Start a watch party. Look at Ben call me a punk. Ben, I'm trying to fix the stream. Am I blocking the thing too?
No, you're fine. I'm not really explaining it too much.
Why is this?
I'll go more in depth once you're gone.
All right, well.
Are we live on Mixer?
Nope. I'm trying to figure it out.
Well, if you chose Facebook, Twitch, or YouTube today, you're in luck. So I just wedged this piece up. I'm kind of shaping it up. I'll talk through it a bit more with these next two pieces. But what I like to do, I like to kind of get all of my clay prepped before I start, like wedged and kind of in this little shape. So that way as I'm going, even when I'm not streaming, that way as I'm going, I can just kind of like take my new piece out of the bag and have it ready to go. That way I'm not kind of bouncing back and forth between stuff. So I've got a little bag here, empty clay bag, that I'll put this in. Clay dries if it's left out, so even in the time that it takes, you know, for me to throw these couple of pieces, I need to wrap it up. So the plastic just helps keep all that moisture in there. So for wedging, I like to use plaster surface. Hello, Kea Ray. So I'll take my clay and using my plaster surface, you can also use canvas too, but pretty much anything that'll just stay steady or stable while I'm doing this. I'm going to take my clay in my right hand, kind of press down and away from myself, and then my left hand is doing the same thing too, but the right hand is really doing most of the work. So pushing down and away, again, kind of similar to kneading, and to get that little triangle or kind of pyramid shape, cone shape, there we go. I'm kind of tilting my right hand so you can see it starts to get thicker on one side and thinner on the other side. I believe this is called spiral wedging. I don't know too much about the different types. This was just the way that I learned from the get-go, and this is how I've always done it, but there are a couple like different styles of it. But it's called spiral wedging, you can see, because it starts to kind of fold in over itself, and it's spiraling the clay around itself. And this helps warm up the clay. It's kind of like a nice massage. Helps just loosen it up a little bit. And I actually don't know if you just heard that, but an air bubble just popped. So it helps kind of compress everything and get rid of any air bubbles that are in your clay. It also aligns all the clay particles, so it just makes it easier to throw with. This clay is a bit on the stiffer side. I'm curious to see how this will work today. The funny thing about clay is if you have a clay that is like a little bit stiffer versus softer, generally you can go a bit thinner with it or bigger with it. So I have a feeling that these might end up being a little bit bigger than the example pieces that I showed you, just because they're thrown with different clays, and this is feeling a bit stiffer. Alright, I got my 2 pounds. I think I might have to kind of awkwardly stand up for this 4 pounds, especially since it's kind of flat at the moment. Like I said, the clay is feeling a little stiff. Welcome to anybody just joining. My name is Emily. We're throwing on the wheel today, despite the appearance at the moment. For wedging, usually, I remember I had an instructor in college who told me, he was a functional potter, told me you should wedge each piece of clay 100 times. And I try to follow that rule until I get tired most of the time. And it can be really tricky too, especially when you're first starting out, to even get the hang of wedging, let alone do it 100 times. But you do kind of feel a little bit of a shift in the clay. I like to recommend at least like 20 times at the very minimum. All right. And I didn't do 100. Anyone was counting. it's for time's sake. Totally. And I'm just patting at the bottom. You see it's kind of like all of the spirals that we had, a little bit uneven. If I were to just take this and put this straight on the wheel, I would get little pockets of air trapped. So I just want to kind of pat that out, round it out. You can see I kind of do that on my wedging table a little bit too. Just get everything nice and smooth. All right, we're gonna start off with the 2 pounds today. I think warming up to that 4 pound is smart. So I'm gonna put this back to the side, and we'll get going. So for anyone just joining, we are throwing closed forms today. So I'll just hold up this little like salt and pepper shaker set. So closed form just being something that is closed on the top without that sort of open circle like you would have with a cup or a vase or whatever. Okay, because these are kind of closed and rounded, they can be a little awkward to pick up. And these in particular are going to be kind of squat. So I am going to throw on what we call a bat. This is just like a fake wheel head that you can put on your wheel and just take the whole thing off rather than having to cut your piece and then take the piece off of the wheel. So I'm going to find my bat pins, which are what helps these guys stay together. They're just like little bolts. And I have holes in my wheel. Not sure if you can see those. That'll kind of stick together too. I'm going to turn my wheel on. I am using an electric wheel today, a Brent Model B. Yeah, good stuff. And I've got a little foot pedal down here. For anyone who isn't familiar with wheels or wheel throwing, I've got a little foot pedal down here that I use to control the speed. So I'm going to turn this so that I can get this on. Got some holes to line up. Give it a pat. And I'm going to clean this off just since it's got some old clay left on it. I got a bucket of water here with a sponge. And I'll be using kind of a variety of tools today. Sponge being the big one, and then I'll likely be using my wooden knife tool along with the metal rib. And we'll see if anything else pops up. I've got a little sketchbook here too, just sort of, oh, it's hard to see, with all of the things that I want to make today that I guess is a secret from you all. But it helps me to have a visual just so that I can kind of, especially with the prototyping, work off of a picture rather than just kind of my memory, have an idea of the proportions and the shape, and then also kind of how many I want to throw too. Okay, so my bat is ready. I'm going to grab our 2 pounds for our first flower frog vase, our closed form. Just going to kind of reset this. All right, I'm going to aim from the middle, attach my clay. The very first step of wheel throwing, if you have not checked out the other streams, or if you haven't seen wheel throwing before, I've done a couple others with CreatiVets. You can definitely check those out. All of their videos are recorded, so you can watch them even after they've been live. Ben says, thank you for supporting the troops. Yes, of course. Definitely an important time to support veterans who are having to social distance and stay isolated at home. So definitely check out all of the other streams. CreatiVets has a schedule lined up every week, pretty much. You can check that out at their website. Yeah, take advantage of watching these. But so the first step that I'm going to do is I'm going to center my clay on the wheel. I'm going to add some water, which will just help kind of reduce friction. And my goal here is, if you imagine, so my wheel is spinning, if you imagine kind of a center point or like a line coming up from that middle, I want my clay to be even on every side. If I have like this much on one side versus kind of more on the other, basically everything's just going to be uneven as you go. Welcome Bruno Perez, just like Ghost, it is just like Ghost. Except hopefully I won't have anybody coming up behind me and ruining my piece. So I'm going to take my left hand on the side, right hand on top, and just try and get that kind of as close to the center as I can. Like I mentioned, this clay is a little bit stiff. Need a partner sitting behind, totally. Where's my tech guy, my IT Garrett? This clay is a little bit stiffer, so it will take me a little bit longer just to get it centered, a little bit more muscle power. A really important thing when you are throwing on the wheel is to keep your hands really steady and stable. So you might notice that I'm kind of tucking my elbows into my legs, and that can be really helpful. So I'm just kind of working my clay up and then back down. This is helping me get everything at the very bottom and in the center centered as well. If you don't have your clay centered from the beginning, it's really hard to sort of go back once you've gone through the next steps and get it on center. So it's pretty important to kind of get it good to go from the beginning. So you want to focus a lot of your time doing this now rather than later. That's feeling good. We'll see how it goes. Another reason, if you're just joining us, I'm making closed forms, so a form that kind of ends up being closed all the way at the top. Another reason that this is a little bit more of like an intermediate or advanced technique is because it is really important to have everything fully centered. When you're first learning, it can be easy to kind of knock stuff off at any point in the throwing process. But for something like this where you are kind of bringing those sides together, it's definitely helpful to have everything be on center during that process. Okay, so from here I'm going to try and kind of think about the width of my piece. So I'm looking, I have another piece that I threw down there, another vase that I'm kind of eyeballing just to get a sense for how wide that one was. Again, this is with 2 pounds, so it's going to be a little bit of a smaller version. I want to kind of set my width now. Otherwise, I'm going to have a harder time kind of changing it. So I'm starting to open up my piece, just taking a thumb and kind of driving straight down. I don't want to go all the way down to the wheel, otherwise my piece won't have a bottom. So I'm being mindful of that. And then we'll just start opening it up to kind of create that space. So I didn't do a great job of wedging. I just came across an air bubble. That's okay. They're not the end of the world. If you ever worked with clay when you were in like elementary school and your teacher told you that you can't have air bubbles because it'll make everything in the kiln explode, it's a little bit of an exaggeration. You can have air bubbles in your piece without them exploding as long as they're kind of completely dry. You just, want to make sure that they're completely dry, and they do kind of create a weak spot in the clay. So for functional, it's more important for kind of functional work. Okay. Trying to decide my width. I might go a little bit wider. One thing that I wanted to change about the shape a little bit, on the prototypes, I wish I could hold them up, but my hands are super messy. They had a geometry. They had sort of a, I guess it would be narrow angle at the bottom. I want that angle to be, I think, a little bit wider. And this is how we gain height and how we kind of thin the walls out. I might have taken this bottom out a little bit too wide. You'll live and you'll learn. But I'm making sure that as I'm doing this, I'm really pulling up and in towards the center. Since our end goal is this sort of rounded top shape, and having that completely closed off, I want to kind of get as close to that as I can from the get-go, since that clay really doesn't like being taken from a wide point to a really super narrow point. So we're gonna get just as close as we can, try and keep our clay happy, our little soon-to-be vase. So again, I've got one hand on the inside, one hand on the outside, pulling up and pulling in towards the center a little bit. I don't want this to get too thin, since I will be kind of applying a lot of pressure on the top. I'll be asking a lot of that clay, and I can show you when we get a little bit closer to that step. But you want to make sure that the clay can kind of support itself through that. All right, so I think this is where I'll start kind of coloring in the top. The technique that I'm going to show you to do this is obviously great for making closed forms, but you can also use it to make just like a really narrow, like if you wanted to make a bottleneck vase or something that had a really narrow opening, but a lot of kind of body at the bottom. Okay, I'm going to make sure that I've got a lot of water up here on the top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take kind of my pointer finger, middle finger, and then my thumbs and create just kind of like a round shape. So I'm really trying to hit my clay with a couple different pressure points, and I'm just going to start slowly squeezing and working my way up to the top. And then I'll kind of wrap a finger at the top. The rim sometimes when you do this tends to get uneven, and kind of bringing that finger over can help just a little bit. And I'm just going to continue doing that. And you'll notice that I kind of start from really far down and work my way up. It just helps kind of bring everything into that same line. So this is not only just fun kind of from a technical standpoint, right? It's like a nice challenge. But the reason I like to utilize it is for something, again, like the salt and pepper shaker, where you don't want any opening except for something really small. But for something like the vases with the built-in flower frogs, it's a good way to get kind of a really nice continuous line in your piece. So obviously I went back and kind of took that cutout lid so that you can take that off. So it's not one piece anymore. But if I were to throw a piece on the wheel and then kind of maybe hand build or throw a piece separately, the two might not kind of come together in the way that I want them to. So that's sort of why I'm utilizing this technique. So I'm just going to, again, continue coloring, taking it really slow. The clay doesn't like going from that really, really wide state to now super closed, so we're kind of easing it into that. And I'm going to do a quick little pull actually from sort of right here up to the top, just because as we're bringing that clay together, it does get a little bit thicker and starts to get kind of like a texture on the inside that I just want to get rid of. So doing a quick little pull. And as I'm doing this, again, I can kind of start pulling in towards that center point to follow that shape. Thanks for joining today. Feel free to shout out any questions. You can drop your name or where you're from, what the weather's like where you're at right now. I'm in Chicago. It's nice and sunny. It's kind of chilly. The weather's been strange the last couple days. We're not quite at spring yet, but that's like how Chicago likes to roll. I'm grateful for the sun. All right, so you can see that opening starting to get narrower. As it gets narrower, I'm actually kind of pulling all the way from the bottom and coming up. Again, you can see right now actually where we're at is pretty much just a nice little narrow vase, right? It's got a cute little opening. We could maybe flare that out a little bit more, trim up our sides, and we've got a really solid little form too. I'm being really careful now that I've kind of closed this opening up to not get any more water in there. So when I'm squeezing water, I'm really focusing on the outside because I can't get my sponge in there to get it. And we don't want any water kind of seeping into the bottom of our piece. It'll sort of dissolve that clay on our bottom and ruin all of our hard work. So I was just sieving that out. You can see that top is starting to get a little, well, maybe you can't. It's starting to get a little wobbly. But again, just kind of working on thinning that section out. And this is sort of where it becomes important to have not thinned out this bottom part too much. Because I'm going to start applying a good amount of pressure kind of down on this top, the sort of neck of our piece. And if this was too thin, it would all just kind of want to cave in. This part would just want to go straight down. So it's good that I've got a nice solid foundation. And I think we're pretty close to sealing this up all the way. So you can see this part is starting to get super, super narrow. We're gonna lose a little bit on the top, but that's okay. Slowly coloring in. And I think this last one we might be able to pinch it off all the way. So what I can see that you all can't right now is just a little tiny black hole that once that sort of disappears, and we'll also have this little bit kind of come off through that pinching. So I'll just put that in my splash pan. I can recycle this clay until it's been fired, which is awesome. So I'll save all my little scraps. Okay, and now we've got a closed form, something that is, looks solid but is totally hollow on the inside. So now I'm going to go in and kind of refine the shape a little bit. I'm going to also just focus on this top a little bit and compress that so that hole doesn't want to open back up. Okay, but right now we've got kind of like this flat top, so I want to go in and really work on that curve. This might be a little tall. I might have made the bottom a bit narrow. We'll see what happens. So I'm going to come in first with my wooden knife tool, and I'm going to just trim up the sides a little bit. I have, whenever you throw, there's always a little bit of clay kind of in between your wheel and your piece that you can't quite get to, so it creates a little bit of like a flare out. I'm going to just trim that off now so that I can really see the shape for what it is. Again, just putting that in my splash pan, and we'll use it later. Got hair in my mouth and wet sloppy clay hands. Okay, now I'm going to really utilize my metal rib tool. This is nice, it's super thin and flexible, so I can kind of bend it to match that curve. So I'm going to start, again, kind of on the top. I really want to make sure that that is nice and sealed up. And so by applying that pressure there first rather than on the sides, it's going to want to close that. If I were to come in on the sides, it could push this up in a weird way and potentially open it back up. I've had that happen before. Okay. The really fun thing about this is since it's completely closed, it acts sort of like a balloon right now. So if I'm pressing on it, down here, it's going to get kind of taller at the top, and it's just a little bit more responsive, which again helps kind of with that continuous shape that I'm looking for. Yeah, this one feels like it's a bit too tall. So again, going back to sort of setting my bottom in the beginning, I could set it a little bit wider, but this also might be a case of the clay being a little bit stiffer. If you're here from the beginning, about half an hour ago, I mentioned that the clay that I'm working with just felt a little bit harder, and it's actually a different clay than I've been using for the past couple times that I've thrown. And the first time that I prototyped this shape. And different clays can definitely have different characteristics that sort of affect your final outcome. So this one, I might have, since it was stiffer, just might have had a little bit more height to it. I was able to get my walls a little bit thinner, which created a bit of a taller piece. But also part of working through a form and kind of working through how you ideally want a design to look in the end is just kind of playing around with it and trying different variations. So we're going to embrace it. The next one I think we'll try making a little bit wider, and we'll see how it looks. See what we like. Obviously, there's a lot more work to be done to this. If you have checked out the other 2 streams that I did, you'll know that sort of after you throw, there's another step called trimming that happens a couple days afterwards. If you're curious about what that is, or how I kind of, made little attachments on my pieces, you can check out that other stream. And let's see, clean this up a little bit. So this is just sort of the first step for these little vases. I'll go back and trim that lid. I'll actually trim the bottom too, because right now that line ends pretty abruptly here. I want to kind of smoothen that out on the bottom. There's a lot more work to be done, but this is the first sort of step. If you're actually curious as to how I finished these flower fronts, the organization I work for, previously known as Abruptly, we just announced our new name, just rebranded here at Firebird Community Arts. And we announced that on Sunday, sort of with we'll be doing sort of streams in the week, similar to kind of how CreatiVets has been doing the stream quarantine. So check that out on Facebook. I'll be doing, I think on Thursday at 11, I'll be doing both a demo for how to throw the flower props, so you'll see this again, but also how I go and finish it up. So the pieces that I'll be working on today will be finished on Thursday. So check out, we're Firebird Community Arts. I think we might actually still be Outreach on Facebook, but you can look up either of those 2 names. Check out streams that we've got something going on today. I can't remember exactly what, but yeah, we've got stuff going on. So you should check those out. Let's see, we've got a question from Dad. 10-year-old USA vet here. Working with clay is one of my favorites, especially today. I'm so happy to hear that you love working with clay, so do I. It's going really well. Just starting, but it's always exciting to be able to stream for CreatiVets and to be able to kind of show you all what I'm working on. It's been a while since I streamed, and I'm definitely excited to get back. I've been excited about what I've been making and been trying to really work through some new forms rather than just kind of make production stuff. For anyone who doesn't know my work or isn't familiar with it, I have stuff to be made every day, or make stuff to be used every day. So I tend to throw a lot of the same stuff over and over again. I've been spending my time in quarantine, kind of trying to work through some new shapes, and I was excited to sort of show you all this technique and how I've been using it during my time in isolation. Okay, I'm thinking that looks good. I did sort of accomplish a little bit of a wider angle than the last piece, so I'm going to clean up here and then I can kind of show you all the difference between the 2. Dad, how is your day going? Let me know. Where are you at? Where are you coming from? All right. Let me grab a towel real quick. If we have a towel. Yes. Okay. So this was previously thrown piece, one of the first. This was with a different clay, but you can see this one here. Actually, let me take it off. First of all, you can see the kind of difference in color between the 2. And that's also partially just because this one's dry and this one's wet. This one's a lot more red. You can see it's a lot narrower and a lot taller. I don't know if I like that as much. So we did it, we tried it, but I'm gonna try going a little bit wider with this next one. Let's see. Dad said, sorry, lost video for a bit. New Hampshire, Seacoast, awesome. Love it. Okay, I'm gonna put this down. And I'm actually gonna wire through this. One thing, that is important with these hollow forms is that you actually poke a little hole in them. So it works since later on I'll be adding holes anyway, sort of on my top part here. Right, I'll be going back and adding holes. Sorry for anyone who, I know there's that thing where people hate looking at like holes in the pattern, so I apologize if that's freaking you out. But I'll be putting holes in these anyway, so it's not a big deal. But I'll just use my needle tool, which creates a really, really fine hole. If you want your shape to kind of be totally smooth and without holes like mine, you can poke it kind of down on the bottom. What I'll do is actually just kind of poke it right in the top in the middle, where I did seal up that hole. This allows the pressure it helps make the pressure not build up on the inside of your piece. So as the clay starts to dry, the outside will get tight, and if you have that air sort of trapped on the inside, it'll end up just applying pressure from the inside and creating cracks on your piece. And if you're even able to kind of dry it without getting cracks, what'll happen when you go to fire it is your piece will explode, again from the pressure on the inside, that air just sort of not being able to expand in the way that it wants to. So for anyone who's not familiar with firing, all of our clay pieces to go from kind of this raw clay state into a finished ceramic state needs to go through kind of what's, for lack of a better description, like an oven. There's both electric and gas versions of these, and they go to pretty high temperatures, about 2300 degrees. So yeah, it's important to have a hole in your closed form piece. Looks like a little gumdrop. Yum. Okay. So I took my bat off. I'll get another bat on here. And we'll do number 2. Same thing, just kind of cleaning that off. Welcome to anyone just joining us. Archidad said, "I love all the wood behind you." Yeah, we've got a lot of wood furniture. So we've got this little grundig, which is actually just what's it, like Formica, but it's a fake wood. That's okay. We still love it. And then a couple different bookcases. My partner and I have kind of pieced together a lot of our furniture, so we've either gotten it, from Craigslist or family. It's really fun. Each piece kind of has a little background or a little story. Archidad said, "What are you making today?" Yes, for anyone who's just joining us, I'm showing you all how to work with closed forms, but I am specifically working on and making these little vases. So the idea is we've got essentially kind of, almost broke it, a little flower frog on top here. So this flower frog is what they're called. I just recently learned about these. But the holes in the top, essentially, you can put the stems through the holes individually, and it helps kind of separate those flowers, and you can arrange them a little bit more specifically. But you can see inside here is hollow just for water, and you can take that on and off for cleaning. So I'm making some little flower frog vases today, as well as a little bit later making some small little salt and pepper shaker sets. So if you want to see those, probably get to those sort of later in the stream today. Cool. So got my piece of clay. We'll just kind of re-round that out. We're going with another 2 pounds, and then we'll do the big one, the 4-pounder. Do you glaze the inside to avoid mineral leaching through the clay? Yes, definitely. So once these pieces are fired, it's hard to see. I've actually got a cup here. I'll glaze the inside. It's very common in ceramics to glaze both the inside and the outside. I like to sort of highlight the clay and what it looks like naturally, so I will just glaze the inside. Oops. Sorry for that loud noise. But yeah, the Archidad said, "Me too." Archidad, do you work with clay? Let me know. I use glaze, obviously, as a way to sort of seal that inside, make it food safe. But it's also a really great way to sort of add another color, some more sort of like decorative elements to your pieces. There are so many different types of glazes that you can really use that as another tool to kind of make the piece your own. So I'm centering my clay here on the wheel, getting ready to make my closed form. Number 2, this one I think will hopefully make a little bit narrower, or a little bit wider, a little bit shorter. Welcome to anybody just joining. My name is Emily. I'm throwing on the wheel. All right. So I'm setting my shape, or not my shape, my width right now. So looking back sort of at my piece, it definitely also got narrower as I was throwing, as I was kind of pulling up. So I'm gonna go a little bit wider than I did even last time, which was kind of wide. So we'll see how it ends up. One thing that would be smart for me to be doing right now is measuring how wide I am going. Again, just thinking about the fact that eventually I'll hopefully be kind of producing these at a larger level. Knowing that sort of target size would be good. I'm trying to look for a ruler. It's kind of buried away under there, so we'll just wing it today. Okay, that said, I haven't loved to, but don't have a place to do it right now or access to a kiln. Definitely. I feel very fortunate. Again, I work for an organization called Art Reach Chicago. We are an arts nonprofit, and we focus on ceramics and glassblower. When we started sheltering in place, my executive director was like, you know, you can take a wheel home with you, which was amazing. It's been really great to be able to kind of work through some ideas here during quarantine, so I definitely sympathize with anybody who's kind of out of touch with their creative practice. So, Archidad, I hope that you can get back to it soon. How long are you all sheltering in place, or how long are you, I know it's hard to expect or predict, when are you hoping to get back into your space? Over there on the, I think, East Coast? All right, so pulling this a little bit wider. Give me a shout, anybody else out there, if you do work with clay. If you don't work with clay, let me know kind of if you've been staying creative during quarantine, what projects you've been working on. Archidad, I'd love to hear if you've been working on anything else during quarantine to kind of scratch the creative itch. All right, I think we might have to go a little bit wider. We're doing it. This clay feels pretty sandy. For anyone who is just joining us, I'm using a standard ceramic supply brick clay. So I don't know where I put my example, but it's kind of like an orangey, like brick color. But it's got a lot of kind of, you know, grit and grog in it, and feels very sandy when you're throwing with it. That also kind of adds to the stiffness of the clay. Archidad is on the East Coast. Had a phone call and missed the beginning of what I said. Finishing your degree in landscape architecture and using sketching and building things like a custom light for my drafting desk. Awesome. Are you West Coast? I am not. I am Midwest. I'm in Chicago here today. Archidad, I was just asking sort of what you've been doing during quarantine, which it sounds like you've been sketching and building some stuff, which is awesome. but also just curious about hopefully when you'll be able to get back into the studio. All right, so as I'm pulling up and in. If anyone watching wants a little bit more of like a step-by-step of what I'm doing, let me know. I'm happy to explain, yeah, if there's interest. Probably not for 3 years or so after school. Gotcha, that makes sense. That makes sense. Landscape architecture, that's exciting. Okay, so we're starting to get a little thin at the bottom. So I think I'm gonna do just one more kind of all over pull, and then we'll move into starting to color our piece. Before I start coloring, I'm gonna get all of the water out of the bottom of my piece, just so that it doesn't soak up after I'm finished. Our dad said, super fun, super challenging. I bet. I can only imagine. So I'm just using a damp sponge to get that water out. And then we'll get some water just on the outside here to start coloring. So taking my fingers kind of all the way around my piece, starting from about halfway up and bringing all of those together. Gently squeezing. You can see that one really definitely dramatically changed kind of the shape of our piece. So I'll grab for some more water and just keep doing that. So I think this is definitely a little bit more of the shape that I was looking for. Ironically, this one looks larger. It's the same amount of clay. I don't know if that's just the proportions. Maybe when we kind of clean it up and close it up, it'll look smaller, but we'll see. So going in and just doing a small pull, sort of thin out that clay that we just colored. Gets really thick when we do that kind of coloring process. I'm also going to do just a quick swipe while it's still fairly open with my sponge to kind of get any clay slip out. I'm paying a lot of attention sort of still to the inside of my piece since in its kind of final form, you'll still be able to take that little lid off and see the inside. So just kind of paying as much attention to it as I can now so that I don't have too much cleanup to do later. This one is a little thin. I might have pulled it a bit too thin. I hope it doesn't collapse. Is Naragum my Twitch stream? I actually do not stream on Twitch. Oh, Naragum gave me a follow. Thank you for the follow. I'm streaming right now through CreatiVets. I think their Twitch stream is CreatiVets Live. I'm not totally sure. But yeah, I am just streaming through them. Currently do not have my own channel. So this is the only place for now that you can see me. Although, like I mentioned, the studio that I work for, the nonprofit, previously Art Reach Chicago, now Firebird Community Arts, will be streaming this week on their Facebook page. They will be doing Facebook Live events, and I'll be doing another demo on Thursday, 11 Central Standard Time. Be sure to check them out on Facebook. This one's a little bit trickier. It's definitely hard to kind of talk and throw this form particularly at the same time. So I think I was a little bit more focused on that first one. I think I'm kind of losing my focus on the second one, and it's showing a little bit. Okay. Again, if you are maybe not interested in the closed form, but kind of in narrow neck bottles, this is a great way. I don't know if you can see that. There we go. Great way to do that as well. Same exact technique. But I'm going to pinch this off. So starting from the very bottom, and I'm coming all the way to the top. And just slowly kind of closing that off. So we're going to lose a little bit of this height. Ooh, that one wasn't so great. So I didn't quite get it, which isn't ideal. There's still a little bit of a hole, so it's kind of hard to see. But again, I'm going to start from the bottom to help me kind of create a little bit of roundness here in the top so that it's not totally flat, and then close that off. This one is definitely kind of wonky. I think it was a combination of things. Doesn't always work, right? But it looks good. It looks good. We've got a little bit of extra thickness kind of at the top, but we can work through it. So I'm going to just take my sponge. We're going to kind of shape this up a little bit. Try and hopefully compress this top down. And then I'll grab my metal rib and maybe just shave a little bit of this off the top. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So if you stuck around for the first one and now this one, you can tell this one's a little bit wider and shorter. I'm going to trim off this side just a little bit so I can start working on finessing my shape. Just using my wooden knife tool here. And yeah, just coming in and really working on that curve. So this shape is a little bit more reminiscent of the original batch that I threw, which I think I'm liking a bit more than the first one that I did. You gotta make what you don't like to know what you do like. Let's see, we've got about an hour left. Perfect. So in the next hour, I will be showing you all a bigger version of this, and then hopefully some tiny, tiny versions with the salt and pepper shakers. It's funny, but doing this on a smaller scale is actually way, way harder than doing it on a big scale, I find. So that's why I started off with these. This is my warm-up. Okay, I wanted to come out a little bit farther here, so again, this is acting sort of like a balloon now that it's totally closed off, and there's a bunch of air trapped inside there. So just by pressing on that top, it kind of helps bump out the sides a little bit. And I can come back in and really refine that shape. Yeah, okay. I do sort of wish this was a bit taller, but it's good. Not bad. When I kind of lean over to the side, it's because sort of from the angle up here, it's hard to get an idea of what the shape looks like. I guess I could look into the camera and that would give me a good idea too. But just by leaning to the side, I can really kind of see that profile of what it'll look like when it's sitting on the table. Alright, I think that's kind of right where I'm at. So, it's finished. We'll go ahead and wire through the bottom. And then we'll poke a quick hole on top just to keep that air pressure nice and even using our needle tool. And we're just going right in the middle here. All right, we'll clean up our bat, and that is number 2 done. Our Arcadad said, pottery wheels are great, but I also love sculpting, especially hands or human form. Yes, they are definitely two very different processes. Sculpting, I find, is a lot slower. You can kind of move at your own pace. All right. I actually, so I've been throwing and working with clay for about 10 years, and started just with wheel throwing, and actually somehow never took a sculpture class until I was sort of, I was in a wheel throwing class in college, and the professor had a sculptural element. We had to build with coils for one of our assignments, and that was the first time that I'd ever kind of used more hand building or sculptural techniques. So I've had a fun time these last couple of years. The organization that I work for, we do a lot of youth programming, and so we'll go into schools around Chicago, and obviously we can't bring wheels into every school or have enough for a classroom. So we do a lot of hand building, and I've sort of learned a lot about it through having to teach it. So that's been really fun. I like to get lost in the zone. Arcadad said same. And for me, wheel throwing kind of does that. It's definitely really meditative, and sort of sitting down and just making the same form over and over again, kind of being able to watch my hands make something has been really fun. All right, so this is the big one. We're going for 4 pounds. What I'm doing right now is called pat centering. And so this is just sort of like a pre-step to centering. It helps, while the clay is just dry, kind of get it lined up in a way that is helpful before you center. Arcadad said, it's so great to help kids, adults connect with the moment and self. I definitely agree. It is unfortunate, but a lot of schools just don't have the funding to provide kind of clay. There's a lot of cost that goes into it, and sort of a lot of special equipment that you need, and it's just not easy in the same way that drawing or painting can be. So it's really awesome to be able to kind of provide that opportunity for them in school. And then, both glassblowing and ceramics are they can be pretty inaccessible, just sort of in general. And again, just given the amount of equipment that you need to do them. And so it's really exciting to be able to offer that to people who might not normally have found themselves in that place. Something I also really love about clay, I think for that reason, because it's not super easy to get, like a kiln in your apartment, or, just to be able to kind of afford those things. Oftentimes, if you are working with clay, it is in a communal space, and being able, to kind of work around people is really enjoyable too. All right, so I'm feeling the stiffness of this clay. With this 4 pounds, it's a little bit harder to move around. So I am just gonna go slow. So the technique I'm using right now is kind of like a pared down version of something we call cone centering. So sometimes you'll see people kind of bring their clay up really tall and thin into kind of this cone shape. I'm not doing that quite as dramatically. I'm just coming up a little bit and then kind of pressing back down on the top. And what that's helping me do is kind of cycle the clay through. So as I'm pushing in and making that taller, that clay from the middle is moving up. As I'm pressing it down, it's kind of cycling out to the outside. So you can think about it sort of like a water fountain, right? So it's pulling that clay from the middle, kind of spraying it out around the sides. And that helps me center it. It also kind of helps loosen the clay up a little bit, similar to wedging. Our dad is working on finals, and Twitch has been a great thing to have running in the background because of all the isolation is driving you stir crazy. Yes. Same. Same. I find myself doing similar things, just sort of having streaming on in the background, even if you're not super focused on what's happening. It can be nice to hear another voice. Archidad, are you home by yourself? Are you with other people? Alright, I think maybe one more and we should be good with this. My son is here, that's all. If he wasn't, I think I would be worse. I agree. I live with my partner, and so I've got somebody here with me. But I would think I would have a really hard time if I was alone. Which is part of the reason why CreatiVets moved their programs to streaming. A lot of their programming is centered around bringing veterans together, bringing them into a community space. And obviously with isolation, that is really hard to do. Actually, it's impossible. So yeah, these streams hopefully provide a little bit of comfort during these times. Okay, this one might be wonky. Centering was really tricky. If you have been here since 10 o'clock, you will know that I didn't wedge this the way that I should have. I should have definitely wedged it for a little bit longer, so my clay might be kind of stiffer in some parts, but we're going to work with it. So this will be the biggest version of this piece that I've made so far. So I'm not sure how wide to go with it. I'm also kind of, since it is a larger piece, sort of starting to open it up as I'm establishing my width. Archidad has been following for a few weeks. Awesome, that's great to hear. Okay, that seems like a good width. Maybe we'll go just a little bit wider, since I seemed to go too narrow on that first one. All right, so we're gonna open this up here. So this is already a little wobbly, which isn't ideal, but we'll work through it. For anybody who's just joining in, welcome. I'm making some closed forms here today, so you can see a couple over here. I'm making, in particular right now, sort of a closed form base. Dad said, I broke up with my partner just before quarantine. Now is an extra great time to have someone. Wait, looking for dogs like half of everyone else, which has been awesome. So happy to hear that people have been taking in pets. But there was such slim pickings at the shelter, called it done for now. Every time I see a classmate cat when we Zoom co-work, I have swoon. Nice. We do not have any pets. We actually moved. Bulldog! My partner Garrett wants a bulldog. We actually moved during quarantine, or sort of like the beginning of the shelter in place here in Chicago. And just moved into an apartment that allows dogs. The place we were in before, it was kind of cats only, which I love cats a lot, and dogs. I love them all, but we're kind of working through figuring out when is a good time to get a pet, and now definitely seems like it's a good time to do that for, you know, both the pet's sake and also to, like, you know, get used to an animal and get into some routines, but not feeling super ready for it. We do have at the studio that I work at, a lot of my coworkers have dogs, and so we have a lot of studio dogs that hang out with us in the hot shop, in the clay studio, and it's really great. Really, really nice. Good time to spend training, definitely. Definitely. Well, Archidad, maybe you can take another trip to the shelter. I know that we've kind of been like scouring Pet Finder a little bit to see if any, you know, new dogs pop up, and there are definitely still some new pets coming through. Ah, I lost my sponge. Okay, so this is definitely a lot larger, a lot wider. This clay is really, like I mentioned earlier, kind of gritty. I'm getting a weird texture on the bottom, so I've gone through and compressed everything, but I just want to take my rib to the bottom and kind of smooth that out. Okay, now we'll start pulling up. This is very large. I might have gone too wide. I know I said that last time too, and it worked out fine, but I think I might have gone way too wide. So with something larger, I'm taking it just a little bit slower. There's a little bit more clay to move around. And so just taking everything slower is always a good method. And I've got, like, the best is when you get hair in your clay or in your water or on your hands while you're throwing, just because it never leaves. It's just stuck to you forever. It's a really great feeling. Working slow. Really feeling like I went too wide. Archidad said, I'm looking for a good non-shedding, low barking, preferably mutt mix for home, adventure, hiking, camping. Nice. Also not too big. Yeah, so I feel you on that. Kind of needing a dog with kind of some certain requirements, and can be hard when a lot of those dogs, luckily, were kind of taken in for quarantine. Well, Archidad, I know you mentioned you were a vet. Thank you for your service. To any other vets out there watching, thank you for your service as well. Hope you all are doing all right out there. So I'm moving so much slower with this piece than I was with the previous pieces. It is a little bit off center at the bottom, so taking it slower just helps me kind of work through that. But also it's just bigger and taking some more time, which is fine. We've got all the time in the world. Okay, I think I might do one more pull and then we'll start coloring in here. This is way larger than I thought it would be. The thing with clay, for anyone who isn't familiar with working with it, is it shrinks both as it dries, but also when it is fired. So it goes through a firing process, goes to really high hot temperatures, and all that clay, all those materials kind of melt together and they get a little bit tighter, closer, and so everything shrinks in that process as it's hardening. So that being said, especially working through some new forms, I'm not really landing on sizes quite yet until I see them fired, because the pieces are just going to get smaller. So kind of having to feel out how big or small I want those to be. So this might feel really large right now, but once it's fired, it might actually be a good size. That's why it's kind of important to try out different amounts, different sizes, different amounts of clay. Very tall. Okay. I am trying to work through the bottom. It feels like there's still a little bit of thickness down here, which isn't bad. Maybe I should actually leave a little bit of that for support's sake later down the road. Just trying to get sort of every inch of that clay that I can utilize. All right, this is looking good. I think we're okay on the width. I think I didn't go too wide. Thank goodness. Okay, so I'm gonna do one collar and then work that inside, make sure I get all that water out. So it's a little bit more nerve-wracking. I don't know if it's really, you all can't really see this, but from my aerial view over here, the larger it is, right, when I was coloring those smaller pieces, I could pretty much touch my fingers together. Right now, I've got a lot more kind of width in between them. So instead of it looking round, it's kind of, the rim gets really distorted. So it feels much more scary than the smaller ones did. I'm just working slow. So you can see we start to get sort of that shoulder. And when I'm talking about sort of thickness in the bottom or support in the bottom, that's what I mean. So if this shoulder is too thin, it's going to want to cave in. This whole part will just kind of drop down. So we want to make sure that that's, A, not getting too wide, right? Like I'm not applying too much pressure up here and I'm kind of working through that to give it support, but also, I lost my train of thought. I don't know what I was going to say. But yeah, also just that we're thinking about it sort of from the beginning as well. All right, I'm gonna go in with my sponge. We're getting a little narrow at the top, so we'll just get out any excess water. And I'm actually gonna go up the sides too to get any of that like slip off of my sides. Just quick little cleans of the hands. We'll do one more collar, and then I think I'll go on the inside for a pull to kind of thin that out. This is definitely, the larger you get, the more kind of precarious everything feels, you know? We got this, we got this. Okay, so we'll go in for a pull. I'm pretty much just starting from that shoulder up. Got a little air bubble stuck in that wall. I might have made this a bit too thin. You live and you learn. We got this. Let's see if we can make it work regardless. Okay. All right, we're getting there. We're getting narrower at the top. Maybe I can pull this off. So just give my hands a quick clean before I go in and do another pull, thin out that section that just got a little bit thicker from that collaring. All right, we're gonna do one more pull. Trying to get as far down as I can, but I'm also kind of trying not to open up this top part too much. All right. Sweating, I'm nervous over here. In any moment, it could all fall apart. Okay. So this was about double the amount of the last two that I made. This was 4 pounds versus 2 pounds. And it makes a big difference. Even just like a pound of clay can make a difference in the amount of time and in the sort of amount of, I don't know, the like level of difficulty. I can feel this section getting really thick, so I'm going to go in and do a pull. I have a feeling we're going to lose a lot of height on this one. So when I'm going in and pulling, my biggest goal is just to try to, sorry, things are getting a little wobbly. Biggest goal is just to try and kind of match the thickness of the wall underneath it. The best that I can. Try and keeping everything nice and even. I'm going to trim this off because it's getting in my way. And it's going to go goodbye anyway. So it's just blocking me from kind of going as far in as I would like to do these pulls. All right. Let's see, will this be the final few? Sorry, I've gone a little quiet. This is requiring a good amount of focus here. I think we're pretty close though. I think we're closing it off right now. Again, we lost a little bit at the top. That's okay. We'll recycle that and use that later. All right. Whew. That was intense. That's not what I was expecting, but we did it. Okay, so she's a little lumpy. I'm gonna go in and really refine that shape. So it's definitely a lot trickier the wider you go. I'm learning. And I don't think I'm gonna get quite, oh, I should trim off. I'm gonna trim off this bottom part before I continue. This is looking good though. I'm happy with it overall. Let's see if we can get it kind of shaped up in the way that I want. So I'm kind of applying more pressure on that side, hoping for it to come up a little bit in the center. I ended up kind of with a really thick spot in the center here, which I'm trying to shave off with my metal rib, my well flexible metal rib. Again, just thinking about what this will look like when I do kind of create that small lid. So yeah, I guess I didn't really explain this. Again, if you want to see, these will be little vases, little flower frog vases. If you want to see the pieces that I'm working on today get finished later, or just see how I finish them, I will be streaming through the studio I work with, Firebird Community Arts, previously Art Reach Chicago. I think we're still Art Reach Chicago on Facebook. I will be streaming on Thursday morning at 11 Central Standard Time. So you can check that out. But basically what I'll do is I'll go in and kind of cut either a round or kind of squiggly edge in here. But it's just, yeah, just really nice to be able to have that really continuous line and not have to try and match up two pieces. Hi, Peggy Ryan from Facebook with some, I can't tell if those are hearts or star eyes. Right, this is looking good. Okay, it worked out. It worked out, folks. I'm going to focus a little bit on this top because it is still kind of weird. But yeah, again, since I am going in and opening this up, I am just really thinking about that inside and what the inside will look like, which you wouldn't have to worry about so much if you were keeping this kind of more of a solid, solid figure. Cool. I'm feeling really happy with the shape. The proportions feel really good. Really good. That first one was kind of the outlier. I think last two, I think I'm happy with. Thanks for everyone watching. here on this Tuesday now afternoon, or I guess not quite yet. So I am just really taking my time to get the shape that I want it. It's important, right? We spent all this time making it, getting it here. So I'm going to take some time really kind of perfecting it, getting really nitpicky with it. My rib keeps giving me weird swirls at the bottom here. Okay. I think that's looking good. As I keep working. I just noticed a little spot that I wanted to change. Is that the money? Yeah, that looks good. Sorry for that weird little arm thing I just did. I was like simultaneously stretching. It's important to stretch when you throw on the wheel. You end up kind of contorting yourself into lots of weird positions. I find too, if I'm like sitting and just keep working, I'll like stand up and not be able to stand up straight. So it's important to stay moving. Okay, I think this looks good. I think this is where I want it. So I'm going to clean up my bat. Give my hands a quick little clean. We will wire through it. And then I'll measure out some clay. I'll do probably just one set of the salt and pepper shakers. Oh, I don't know. We've got half an hour left. We'll see. We'll see how many we can crank out. Oh, I gotta poke a hole in this too. Forgot to do that. So I'm poking that hole in the top just to keep the pressure from the inside from building up too much as the piece dries. It does also, I think that went all the way through. I hope it wasn't that thick. It also helps the inside, it doesn't get a ton of air, but it helps the inside start to dry. The thing with these, as they're drying, if you're kind of altering them and cutting them apart, like I am, sorry, hair moment, it's all on my face. If you're cutting them apart and altering them, the outside is going to dry a lot faster than the inside will, and so you're kind of left with this weird state of dryness. So having at least a small hole helps a bit. I like to sort of like cut mine up and then have an additional sort of drying process. It's tricky. Again, another reason it's a little bit more of like an advanced intermediate technique. There's some familiarity with clay that definitely adds to your success advantage. Cool. That's a nice little shape. I like it. All right. Well, let's measure out some clay for our salt and pepper shakers. I don't know where to put this. I'm running out of room. Move some stuff around. So these are going to be significantly smaller. These are just going to be little 8 ounce, so half a pound pieces. These I'm not going to do on bats. Yeah, they're small enough. I think they should be able to come off. I'm trying to remember how I did it the first time. So here, I'll show you all real quick. For anyone who is tuned in a little bit later, these are the little salt and pepper shaker sets that I'll be making. Argadad said, sorry if I missed anything you mentioned to me. I move every 10 to 20 minutes. No worries. I'm like one of those tall wavy arm thingies at the car dealerships, moving all around, or a kindergarten kid. It's important. It's important to stay moving. Get some exercise in. He also asked who's Peggy Ryan. Peggy Ryan is my mother. Hey, Mom. Okay, we got a theme wheel. I am not going to wedge these pieces. Since they're so small, I'll just do some wheel wedging, some of that kind of cone wedging that I talked about before. So I'll just grab my scale and we'll get some little pieces set up. Again, just using a little kitchen scale. This one specifically has pounds, ounces. Oh, I pressed the wrong button. You can measure in grams. It's nice. You can kind of change up what you're measuring and what units you're using. Okay. I think we'll be good with just two. My computer battery is getting low. I gotta keep an eye on it. So we're just going with little 1/2 pounds after our big mama 4 pounds. Over here, this will be nice. 8 ounces, that one was a little over. .1, it'll do. No. Sweet. Okay, so we'll just do one of each shape for today, I think. That'll put us in a good spot time-wise. So again, you could wedge these up. These are kind of so small, it's sort of annoying to do that. What I'll do sometimes is kind of wedge up a whole big piece and then cut up my 8 ounces later. This feels a lot less stiff. Maybe it's just because it's smaller. But yeah, I'll just wheel wedge these using the cone wedging method that I talked about a little bit earlier. And if you weren't here, you'll find out right now. I'm just going to set that down in some plastic. I am also just kind of squishing them to get them a bit loosened up. Some good forearm exercises. All right. These I'm just going to go with little sphere shapes. 8 ounces seems like a lot for these pieces. But I'm also trying to remember that they'll shrink. So they are going to be bigger. I'm looking at the examples right now. They're going to be bigger now than they will be later. Okay, let's hop right into it. I'm going to start with the sort of squatter rounder one. I think that's going to be easier to do. So again, I am cone wedging. So what that looks like is kind of hard since this is such a tiny piece. I'm pushing up to get the sort of taller version of it and then pressing down and sort of cycling that clay through. All right. Ouch. It's groggy clay. Cutting up the side of my hands. Okay. So I'm going to open up my piece now that I've got it nice and centered through some cone wedging. So small. It feels so small after that big piece. I'm going to go out to about here, I think. We'll kind of compress our bottom a little bit. We'll start pulling up. These are going to go by quick. So I mentioned kind of earlier that I was starting with the larger pieces to warm up for the smaller ones, which seems counterintuitive. But these tiny, tiny pieces, especially when you're going in and kind of collaring them, get really tricky. Oh, I've got hair in my mouth, sorry. They get really tricky because that sort of point is so much smaller. Kind of like a top, it just has a lot more, it just wants to move a lot more. And it tends to be thinner and so a little bit more delicate. So especially with the collaring, not so much with the pulling up, that went by pretty quick. But with the collaring, I am, again, really just taking my time, kind of pressing that all together. You can see it's starting to get smaller. These are really super cute. You know, if you're just using the collaring as a way to get sort of a narrow neck on your piece, make really, really sweet little bud vases this way. Okay, I think one little pull here, and then I think one more collar and we can close this up. Let's do it. So I'm making a little here, a little closed form. This will be the pepper shaker? I don't know, or the salt shaker? Oh, let me know. Would you like the squat one to be a salt shaker or a pepper shaker? Tall or short? Which one? Drop it in the chat. Eee, this is getting tricky. Right. Maybe? There's still a little tiny hole. Okay. Whew. Great. Dad said salt tall. Done. That's it. Just like a little mini volcano, definitely. Did I say butt faces? I'm not sure that I did. Bud vase. Like a little, like bud, flower bud. Butt face. You could use this as a method to make little butts too if you wanted to. Choice is yours. We won't judge your art. A butt face would be cute, like a little crack and then a little flower coming out. I don't know. Run with it, somebody. Somebody run with the idea. Okay, I'm gonna clean up this side. So small. This one actually looks like a gumdrop. Ooh, sorry for that awful metal on metal noise I just subjected you all to. All right, that looks great. Does it look different than my other one? Yeah. Do I care? Yeah. So I'm gonna try and change that shape just a tad. Oh, it's good. That's cute. Let's roll with it. And just like a little belly button. Oh, that didn't really fix it. That's okay. All right. So this will be our pepper shaker, the little small Scott one. Hey, IT Garrett. You can't hear me. I'll have to wash my hands and get a charger. Real quick. So that I don't lose y'all in the end of the stream. We got about 13 minutes left. I know you all have been dying to see the salt shaker. It's the only reason you're here. Okay. Ooh. Yep, so feeling stiff after having sat at that wheel. Trying not to get clay over everything that I own. I'm grabbing this charger. Arcadad said, I couldn't find your Instagram. So I'm streaming for CreatiVets right now. I think their Instagram is just CreatiVets. The organization that I work for is called Firebird Community Arts. They are on Instagram. And my personal Instagram is, I have two. I've got, my like clay art Instagram is Emrys Ceramics. It's EMRIS Ceramics. And that's where you can see all my work. And there's a link to my website on that as well. All right, so our little pepper shaker is done. I'm gonna grab a little wear board. This is just some wood to put my piece on. We're all charged up, yep. Thank you for the follow, Arcadad, I appreciate it. Okay, we'll wire through this and take it off. Same thing with this one. I'm going to poke a hole. I'm going to take it off, then poke a hole. I'm going to try to poke a hole in where I would put the hole for the shaker. Ooh, so tiny. So small. There you go. One down, one to go. Okay, so I'll grab my needle tool, poke that hole right about here. Just making sure that I do go all the way through. And we'll make a little buddy for this friend and call it a stream. Okay. Last one, our salt shaker. So this one's going to be a little bit taller, or like this shape. Hopefully, we'll see. Arcadad said, "Feel free to check out my stream sometime." Arcadad, what do you stream? I'm not super familiar with Twitch. Actually, the CreatiVets streaming was kind of my first introduction to it. So this is kind of new for me. So in Chicago today, I'm blanking on the group. I think the Blue Jets. I'm sorry that I'm getting that wrong, but it's like a pilot team, and they will perform like during the Chicago Air and Water Show, and they're flying today to honor all of the essential workers and response teams for COVID, and they just flew past our apartment. I just saw them out in the window. That was pretty cool. They're doing just like a huge kind of flyover Chicago. All right, so since this one's going to be taller, I'm going to make the base a lot narrower and really kind of focus on height rather than width. Twitch is primarily a gaming stream, but our community is great. I've been streaming some of his work, awesome. So far has been ArcGIS, but also some sketching and drawing. So everybody, if you're interested, Archidad has a stream, and you can check that out. It sounds like it's some cool art sketching, drawing. I don't know what ArcGIS is. I have a feeling it's probably related to architecture, maybe some drafting. But yeah, check that out. Alright, we'll get that water out of the bottom. Admiring my work over there, don't mind me. Archidad said it is a GIS mapping software. Also do Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. That's awesome. I obviously like working with my hands, and so I didn't really, besides the basics, learn too much in Photoshop. And even then, it was kind of like a high school class that I was required to take. And so none of it really stuck with me too much. So I find myself now needing to use Photoshop and editing like photos of my work, feeling really just like lost on how to do it. So that's awesome that you offer streams of your work, and hopefully, because I definitely rely a lot on videos and tutorials, watching other people do it to kind of figure out how to do what I want to do. I just recently learned how to like extend the background. So normally when I take photos, I take them outside and I take them on just kind of a white background and use the sun shadow to kind of, yeah, just use that as a style for my photos. And the sheet of paper that I have is maybe, I don't know, 18 by 20 or something, not very big. And so sometimes I'll shoot larger work and it will, the background won't go all the way, so I'll get like the random alley background where I was shooting, or, you know, just like extra background. I recently figured out how to extend that background. This is looking really wide, not how I want it to look. Recently found out how to extend the background and feel very fancy, feel very much like a pro, you know. That was sort of like the one thing that I learned how to do in Photoshop that is more than just changing the like saturation of a photo. So I'm going in just to narrow it. It was looking really wide and kind of strange. I got caught up. Dad said, I love the feeling of finished work and admiring it. Yeah, it's fun. I like, right now, just kind of looking at the different shapes, the really subtle kind of changes in profile, and checking out how those change the feel of the piece. So I'm trying to narrow this up. Which was too wide. Still feeling a little wide, but again, it will get narrower as it dries and once it's fired, so I'm not going to spend too much time trying to get it as narrow as my example piece, which has already been fired. So we're going to close this one up. This one's really tricky. This one's hard to get a thin top to, because you're kind of limited by the pull. I don't know if that made any sense what I just said. We're just going to close it. It's okay if it's a little bit thick. What I'll actually do is come in with my metal rib, kind of almost just slice off that top. I opened it back up. That defeated the purpose of what I was trying to do. All right, it's closed. Okay, so now we'll shape it up a little bit. Our salt shaker of our salt and pepper shaker set, utilizing closed forms. Woohoo! Oh, that didn't work. Cool. And this one had kind of a narrower top than the base, so let's see if I can mimic that form as well. Ooh, we've received 100 messages today with Restream chat. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching. Thanks for chatting with me. So this one actually feels like it's got too much air in it. Like I can't really get the shape that I want, how it is at the moment. So I'm gonna kind of smooth out this top a little bit, and then I'm gonna go in and poke a hole. Just because right now, like I said, with a closed form, you're getting kind of that balloon effect. If I apply pressure in one spot, that air is it's not going anywhere except for somewhere else in the piece. So I want that air to kind of be able to escape right now. So I'm gonna poke a hole maybe here-ish, just so that I can change that form and make it a bit narrower overall. And then that will kind of conclude our stream for today. I know there's another stream with CreatiVets this afternoon. I am not remembering what it is, but definitely be sure to check out their schedule. It's on their website under, I think, the live tab. Be sure to check out what else they got going on today and this week. Is only Tuesday. We got a couple more days. And like I mentioned, if you want to see how I finish off those vases, these pieces here that I threw, how I turn them into the flower frog vases, make sure to check out Firebird Community Arts, previously Art Reach Chicago, their streams on Facebook this week. I'll be streaming with them on Thursday, but I know we've got some yoga, as well as some meditative drawing, some flame working, which is small scale glass blowing. Be sure to check those out in addition to CreatiVets' streaming schedule. I'm not able to get this quite the way that I want it to. I think it might be the tool that I'm using, so I'm going to come in with the, yeah, wooden knife tool for the win. Ooh! I don't know that, I might need to poke another hole. I don't know that air is able to come out sort of in the way that I need it to be at the moment. But yeah, feel free to drop any kind of last questions if you've got them for today. Otherwise, thanks for being here. As I try to work through my salt shaker. Just really feels like that air isn't actually coming out in the way that I want it to. I think I might actually just cut a small hole where I close it up, which is so counterintuitive, and actually I just kind of botched it a little bit. That's scary. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to fix that. we'll take a couple minutes here. We might go over a little bit. Try and fix this guy up. If you haven't noticed, form is very important to me, and a lot of my work is pretty simple, as I'm sure you've noticed through the examples. So what the form looks like, I spend a lot of time on, just because I'm not necessarily adding a lot of surface decoration. It's kind of the thing that you're going to pay attention to the most. I don't know if you just saw, but my tool kind of caught on the piece. It's really off-center now. I'm not sure if we can bring it back. Again, this is why it's almost a little bit harder to work with smaller pieces. They're just so much more delicate. I just gotta slow my wheel down and kind of really respond to what the clay is doing, paying a bit more attention to it. So that happens sort of, I think, from me applying too much pressure. I'm starting to get the same thing happening now. All right, that looks better. I'm going to try and close it back up. Grab some water on my fingers. So yeah, do we need a little bit more practice with that salt shaker shape? Definitely. But that's all right. Do kind of shape up here. So this one I think is a little bit wider at the base than the other one was. But maybe we'll like it more that way. Who knows? It's a little bit more like a cone triangle shape. Picky, picky, picky over here. All right, I think that is looking pretty close. And we will end it here today. No, just kidding. There we go. Okay. All right. So our final piece, our salt shaker, we'll give it a quick wire through. And we'll pair it with its little pepper friend over here. I'm gonna give my hands a quick wash. Grab our wire board. Oh, I do need to poke a hole after I take it off. This one's a little bit easier to pick up since it's a bit taller. Poke a tiny hole. And there you have it, a little salt and pepper shaker set. Cool. Well, everyone, thanks so much for watching today. If you missed any part of it and you want to check out this stream later, all of CreatiVets' streams are recorded and put into kind of like an archive. So you can check out the beginning of this video, check out other previous videos. They have a ton now. They've been streaming for a couple weeks. So be sure to check those out. Awesome. Thank you for CreatiVets for having me again. I'm really enjoying this, trying to fix my weird bangs from all of my bending over sideways. Yeah, thank you all for joining. And be sure to check out the stream later today. All right. Bye, everybody.
We are a nonprofit that's helping combat disabled veterans heal through the arts and music. Our art programs in Chicago and California help combat disabled veterans tell their story through art. We enroll them into the best art institutes in the country. We pay for their tuition, their housing, their food all 3 weeks so that they can finally tell their story through art. We also bring combat disabled veterans to Nashville, to places and rooms like this here at the Grand Ole Opry, to tell their story for the first time with pro songwriters all about the things that they went through that they've never been able to talk about before. These programs have been extremely successful in helping veterans combat their PTSD. Right now, CreatiVets has more veterans applying for our programs than we do funding. So if you can go to creativets.org and donate, we would appreciate it.